Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Resistance Bureau, where my colleagues and I shine a light on the enduring struggles for freedom worldwide and the oft undercovered issues in Africa that should demand our attention. I'm joined today by Joseph Oleshangay, a Maasai human rights lawyer and award-winning campaigner for indigenous rights in Tanzania. Joseph was recently featured in an Al Jazeera English documentary, In the Shadow of the Serengeti, which highlights the struggle to protect the Maasai community from violent government land grabs and the eviction from their ancestral homeland. I'm so glad to be speaking with you today, Joseph. So thank you for joining us and for helping to both educate our audience and to speak your truth. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes.
Great. So Joseph, let's dive right in. We know that the Maasai people have lived in the Serengeti for centuries. They were forcibly displaced from their homes beginning in the 1950s by British colonial authorities. Fast forward to today, and they are once again facing violent expulsion to make way for international tourism. So, if you could please make your case to our audience about the historical and present day importance of this issue, and why should people both in Tanzania and outside of the country be concerned with all of this?
Okay, thank you very much again. And in brief, uh, the Maasai occupy different places in Tanzania, particularly they are situated in northern Tanzania. In what was during the colonial British and German Tanganyika. So it's very important to understand. They have occupied this area, Serengeti, Ngorongoro, for centuries. You know, there has been propaganda about when did they arrive and all other, but it's for centuries they have been in Ngorongoro, Serengeti. In 1950, and actually the campaign started in 1930s by the British to have the Maasai out of Serengeti. By 1950, the campaign was by colonial regime then that the Maasai should be pushed out. Actually, the idea was half of the Serengeti, so from the central Serengeti to the north. But the conservation NGO, largely from the global north, the America, British, to meet the Great Britains, the Germany, led by Frankfurt Zoological Society, the nature conservers in the UK and different others, did campaign for not only be evicted from Serengeti, but also from Ngorongoro. And so a compromise was reached by the colonial government and conservation NGO, not with the Maasai, to have now Maasai evicted in Serengeti alone and retain their right in Ngorongoro, but with some adjustment that a conservation unit be also established. So this is how we ended up. My father at that time was living in Serengeti as a young boy then, and they were forced out. There has, because some people are saying, oh, there has been some discussion. I have read, I have listened to my father, I listened to different other people. It was a colonial system as against the subject of colonialism. So we know how colonialism operates, and that's how we ended up losing Serengeti. And so it is a concern for everyone because we're being forced. Our parents and our grandparents were forced out of Serengeti for what they called for the world interest. And now we are almost 70 years, 60 something years, actually 64, 65. We are being told you have to get out of Ngorongoro for the interest of the world. So it's like there is a world without us. And I think which we are not going to agree on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph, for that background. I think it's really important for people listening today to begin to wrap their heads around some of these, really complex issues. And while you were talking, and even before this, I was thinking about this conversation I was planning to have with you, and one issue that continually popped into my head was this notion of cultural appropriation. And there really seems to be no better example of this than the Maasai. As soon as one lands in Tanzania, for example, and even neighboring states like Kenya, you're really bombarded with Maasai imagery, right? The government is literally, it seems, hearing from you and reading some of the background information on this topic, that the government is trying to destroy the Maasai while at the same time exploiting their likeness and their heritage and their culture for profit. What are your thoughts on
The irony of what's really happened is, as you said rightly, the government want to force the Maasai out of Ngorongoro, as the British did with the Serengeti. And so in now the process to expel the Maasai out of Ngorongoro, they use bad names. So they always say, if you want to kill a dog, you give a bad name. So that's what the government is doing. And thereafter, but they also feel like, expelling the Maasai generally, they will also lose the economy. So now the proposal, actually from 2019, where we should expel the Maasai. Yes. They also say, but the Maasai generate income through tourism. So we should retain some. So they are not retained or exploit their culture, which in tourism, it pays. And so, is sort of a two dilemma of retaining to exploit, but with intention to destroy the culture. So they are not in love with the culture; they are in love with the money that is bleeded from that culture expropriation. And the Maasai, as people, we are human beings like other, but particularly our culture, our spirituality, our tradition is attached to land. So land is a very central issue. You
Right.
touch it, you touch our synagogues. You touch it, you touch our tradition. You touch it, you touch the grazing area. You touch our home. So it's not a piece of land that we can say, oh, we can trade, and maybe there is 10 acres somewhere else. It's not the 10 acres. Is the mountain with purpose. So are you going to take away the mountains with people? If you are not going to take the mountains, then definitely you should stop forcing the people, because it's the land with purpose. It's not just a piece of land.
Right. And thank you again for that. You bring up the issue of land, and I think that's a really good segue to the next question I have for you. Um, and obviously, the international advocacy you've been doing as part of this is a really important component to any campaign such as yours, but you've also had an impact in the courtroom. And my understanding is that this week could be a rather pivotal one, particularly at the East African Court of Justice. So I wanted you to tell us about this case as well as the progress you may have made on other legal fronts worldwide, and in particularly the regional courts in Africa.
Okay, so with the case about the Maasai, and now, having now grown into this community, I don't read the papers to understand the problem. I grow up into it. Becoming a lawyer, I never knew law can pay. I knew about law, the means to address injustice. So having now grown up, then becoming a lawyer, then this problem came. So to me, is what I thought I should be fighting when I grow up is now in my own face. So two or three things that I thought maybe is important to do. One, now being a sort of a minority population is not the least minority. There are others who are minority and different others, but it's not the largest population in Tanzania. It's not the third, it's not the fourth, it's not the fifth, it's not the eighth, or it's not maybe even the 15th. So the things I thought is now fighting with the governments and influential groups. One of it is to sort of make it noise, because I believe you can only address injustice if you are not fighting alone. So that's one. But second, and that's why you can hear me speaking out. So he's not only a lawyer now going to court, but also shouting a bit, because I believe is one, the problem is not only local, it's also international, because it's pressure groups from international arena, from UNESCO, conservation NGO around the world, governments, popping a lot of money, then our government. So I don't try to localize because it's not local. But second is going to court. And going to court, we have different faults. So we have the local courts, which of course were litigating massively for the last 2 years, 3 years, 2022, 2023, 2024. We have almost more than 20 cases relating to only two communities, Lolion and Ngorongoro. So you file a case, there is another violation. People are being displaced, you have to file a case. You win it, the government do the other way around to protect it again after winning. So it's like, what the hell is this? Because we go to court as a neutral arbiter. Then you win, then the government circumvent the procedures. then you are trying to think of that. You now get like you don't even have the right to vote. You have to go to court again. And then when you are thinking of that, all the villages they registered. So you have to go to court again. So it has been back and forth in court corridors trying to fight. But again, we have the East African Court of Justice, for which, for example, we have cases since 2017. There was a eviction that happened in 2017. We have to file a case. We got a court order that the government should not interfere, and they did interfere. And so we had to go. Of course, there are some anomalies that happened. We went to the appeals. We won in the appeal. There's a trial in the South African Court of Justice Appellate Division. So now is in the trial court again. Actually, yesterday we had the contempt of courts in the South African Court of Justice hearing yesterday. Then we have also another case, for example, related to Ngorongoro, which is my home village, my home area, which is the division of Ngorongoro, which relate to government decision to take away all social service. So in Loliondo, there was eviction. In Ngorongoro, they come with a different strategy. Why? Because there is so much tourism and they fear shooting people not because they kill people, because they can also kill tourism through killing people. So they come with their soft way, in their opinion, to kill the people without physically shooting. That's taking away health service. That's taking away the schools. That's making sure that you don't have access to anything for 4 years, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. The government has not budgeted $1 for the community they say is too many, is 100,000 people. So they collect taxes, but they cannot repair the window. And so we have to go to the Court of Justice since 2022. So we have a case pending in the court. So it has been trying to fight in different forums. Ultimately, with the view, of course, of, I think we need a second liberation. The one we got in 1961. I think it's not for everyone. And this is what we are fighting for. And
Right.
then, of course, you have to do the international campaign because I said it's not recall. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And just to sort of dig a bit deeper, if I could, just really quickly on the issue of land, because I think you expounded upon that so brilliantly and what it means to the Maasai people. And as a lawyer, I am not a lawyer, so this is perhaps a naive question, but I think it might help shed some further light on the obstacles you face in your work. So in this day and age, how difficult is it to fight for collective land rights, which seems to be your campaign? In other words, how do you press for collectivist rights in court systems that are almost entirely premised on the notion of private property and ownership? Can you
You have
explain how you maneuver around
actually,
that?
and I wanted to say something into that because you grow up saying, I will have to go to use the court to fight for justice because we are not thinking of using violence, arms to
Hmm.
fight. We want to use the mind. And now you found yourself, but this is not your court. Okay? So we have the judicial system that does not understand the idea of collective rights. Of course, you can file, a case that involves many people, but in Tanzania, for example, if you are to file a case, maybe of 10,000 people, if you win, only 10,000 people will get a right. Then the rest, 90,000 people, the court will say they never come to court corridors. So the winning is not for them. So it's very difficult now you bring the general struggle of 1,000, 100,000 people to one judge. To me is not a good way because the judge can error, the judge can manipulate, the judge can coerce, in a system that we are working. But second, the principles that applies in law, they want us to explain this is my land. But the Maasai do not know about this is mine, in exception of the Boma and the house that actually belong to the woman, the wife, the mother, and whatever. It's not even for the father, it's not for the man. In beyond that, the Maasai do not have a concept of my land is our land. So if you take that case to court and you say is our, you and who? Where is that other? So, for example, actually, we filed the case in 2022. One of the argument is we use the 5 people to file the case against the minister who declared political game control. And in our argument, we're saying this decision impacted the applicants and their other people, their other community. The court said, no, we can only address the question as to the impact to the 5 people and not the rest of the people. So it's very difficult to use the judicial system, and unless you file the case of 90,000 people, which is very, very difficult. So we try now to balance at least of using the judicial system in a way that we are not going to cause the trouble for the rest. And this is the reason, for example, when I say there are cases in the Supreme Court of Justice and other in the High Court, is because understanding the two jurisprudence, I know the cases, if we were to take in our courts, we do not only lose, we are likely to cause the more damage to our community, even than that we have. So we try to go to different forums looking into the one with the more developed jurisprudence toward a certain kind of a principle. For example, African Court of Human Rights have a more better jurisprudence toward the collective rights of community, but our courts do not have. Sadly, Tanzania withdrew from allowing individual from accessing the court. The court is in Arusha, but you cannot file one. And so it's very challenging, but of course we try because sometimes you already lost the land. So if you go, for example, the Pololet was established violently, people evicted. So whether I go to court and lose, we have already lost. So I will go because maybe we can get something better. And this was, it has been very difficult to argue in a court that does not know the language that you're speaking, that does not know, the attachment of people to it. They feel like is 10,000 acres. Is not 10,000 acres. We are referring to the place that our people conduct the rite of passage, the place that our people, have certain other rituals, the place that our people conduct their prayer. Okay, the kind of the tree that our people have certain spiritual value. And when we say that, they say, a tree is a tree. Yes, a tree is not a tree. Maybe for them it is. For us, it is not. And it's difficult to argue in a context like that. So,
Yeah.
for example, they say, Oldonyo Lengai, you translate, is a mountain. They know is a mountain of God. That's what the Maasai says. But then they say is a geopark, is a global geopark. So you have to get out. How can you get out of your synagogues? Is our heritage. Is
Mm.
not the UNESCO. UNESCO is just like 50 years in Gorongoro or 60. And how can that be their heritage and not ours who have been here for centuries?
Absolutely. And, hearing you discuss these issues, it's of course an issue um, about land. Of course, that's paramount here, and the importance that land holds for the Maasai people as a collective. But hearing you talk about this, in effect, what it seems like we're talking about is an issue of citizenship, right? And of human dignity. And people are being erased through an erasure of their heritage and their culture. So I wanted, if you could tell us about the politics of all of this in the Tanzanian context and what, if any, the impact that the upcoming general elections might have in this complex situation. I ask this because, of course, we can't get away without talking about this year's elections, and particularly, you'll notice a lot of the prominent opposition figures, Tundu Lissu and others, who've been really outspoken about these issues you're talking about, going to Ngorongoro and elsewhere, and standing on behalf of the Maasai people. So, what is the politics of all this? How does it shape, the society in Tanzania, and what, if any, impacts might the upcoming elections have on all these issues that you're discussing here today?
Okay, thank you. And that's actually two things. One, politics play a very central role into the problem that we're speaking. Actually, the turn of events, we have been having a Ngorongoro problem for years that has shaped, of course, our thinking, even as kids growing and others. But never before did we find ourselves in a situation like we have been from 6 April 2021 and 6 April because someone spoken, and that someone is the president. It was for the first time that the president spoken, saying a decision must be done. And 6 days later, a decision was made. And that decision was to demolish 9 primary schools. The government says they were built by the government without the government knowledge. 6 dispensaries, 6 out of the only 7. 4 churches, all of them under pretext that they never knew how do those institutions come into existence. Part of those schools, and actually including the police station, a police station was built, someone told me, because I was not born, in my village, during, actually he said, during Tanzania-Uganda war in 1978-9. Then in 2021, the government come and say, this police station exists without our knowledge. The 2 churches, two of them actually made a request for the building of the school that I studied myself. That my father studied. The school was built in 1947 by the colonial government, okay, and different others. So the government was, and when I mentioned the president is the cause. She's spoken, something must be done, and in 6 days, a notice was issued, not only to demolish our home, but also to demolish social service. So it brings a political, is a very high profile person making a decision. And from then, it has been a massive problems. Actually, we have been not in a catch-22, we have been in a battle for survival. Tagged from left, right, and center, from parliaments, from the central governments. You go to courts, is the same language, And actually, even the court interpretation of the text of the arguments is as if is a politician sitting somewhere and actually arguing. And this is how we have ended up, for example, having people displaced in Oliondo and different other areas. Now, with the problem that we are having in Ngorongoro, like without social service functioning, because of course they did not demolish schools after our, resistance. And you mentioned about Tunlisu. Because I said on 6, the president spoken. On 16, we had the first Zoom about this problem. And I was with Tundu Lissu on 16. That was April, just 10 days after the president had spoken. And of course, now we have 2 high-profile people, one too much, not only against us, actually, now bringing all the mighty power of the state toward implementation of the government plans. Then we have the other now, at least trying to use, of course, is not wielding the powers of the state, but using the mind and the influence to make sure that at least our voice is being heard. Lisu tried, for example, to go to Ngorongoro. He was arrested. His crime is trying to go to Ngorongoro. I was actually ahead of him. So when he was actually coming from Karatu, I was with my father and I was stopped in the entrance gate of the Ngorongoro. I wrote an article in the Left Berlin. And actually the picture that appears is of Tundu Lisu because Lisu was arrested and they told me the only way for you to go to your village is if we can carry your body. That was the language. So I had to go and my father back because we are not allowed to. It's very easy to go to Uganda, to go to Kenya, to go to Rwanda than a Maasai to go to Morogoro. You'll be asked, what is your ID? Which one? No one knows. So you have to, what was apartheid South Africa? You move with the pass card. There are places for certain people. You want to go because social service is crashed. Medical Flying Service, an organization that has been operating in this area since 1970s, was grounded in April 2022. So that the government facilities are not working, the private actors cannot provide health service, cannot airlift the people who are sick. So if a pregnant woman, want to travel to a neighboring district, for example, to get treatment, she has to first look for the ID because when you are coming back, you'll be asked, where is the ID? You if you have a so to us is 2 things. is whether we are going for another 5 years that we have been having, that our, when they transferred voter register, including of dead people. Some dead people dead 2 years ago, 5 years ago, appears themselves registered somewhere. So having the current government in power until 2030 to us is that we'll be in the same problems for the next 5 years, something we'll never wish to be. If there is changes in government, having a character like Tundu Lissu, it also means a less battle. And actually, I think if it is Lissu, maybe if it is someone else, is a less battle. If it is Lissu, to me, is a no battle because he understands the problem. He is actually against what's happening, not just on rhetorics, not just because he's a politician. Actually, Lissu participated in the writings of a book known as the Maasai Writing in Ngorongoro, written by a very eminent professor, Shivich,
Hmm.
in 1996. He did actually another article himself in 2001, 20,000 and then 2001, either of the two. He has been speaking in parliament when he was a member of parliament, including criticizing our own members for being irresponsible. So he is a person who lives what he says. He stand with the principles. So he is not just because he's political. Some
Right.
people stand with an idea because it's political, it is convenient, it's populous. Lisu is not that kind of person. Maybe you can be displaced, and that's President Samia. We have another person. If he can, then we might be safe. We are living like literally animal in our own areas. Last year, myself, I had, just like I was going home and some people came and were saying, I'm organized like a rebellious group. I was just going for a party, a very traditional Maasai, ceremony. And then they wrote a note like the Maasai are not allowed to organize any events throughout the 8,000 square kilometers. So it has been sort of a militarized area. Is the law that applies, the practice that applies is of no test in other place in the country.
Wow. Well, thank you, Joseph, for explaining in great detail the lived reality that many Maasai people, such as yourself, are having to struggle with today. And before we closed out, I wanted to ask you specifically about the documentary I mentioned at the outset, In the Shadow of the Serengeti. Where can people watch this film, and what issues should we be paying attention to going forward? In other words, what's next on the horizon for you and your work? How can we be helpful? And opportunities like this, does it help you in your work? Does elevating your profile help to keep you safe? I know you've mentioned several instances of threats against you, some of the harassment and intimidation you have faced, the arrests. Does this sort of attention help or does it hinder your work? I love your thoughts on all of that before we close out this discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. So in the shadow of Serengeti is the recent film that we met, trying to expose what has been happening actually for the last particularly 4 years. So anyone can watch that in the Al Jazeera as The Witness. So you can just write Al Jazeera The Witness or In the Shadow of Serengeti. Definitely you'll see a 25 film, very decent. This film is about, uh, the Maasai, it's not only about me. So I was, of course, the set of it. Not about me, but about the Maasai struggle is about the Maasai reality on daily basis. So you can actually see what happened, or it is not something planned. Like today you go, you have a case, then some people are abducted somewhere, and then you go to follow them. You also have your own other problems because they're not only following them, they're also following you. So the most important things you can give attention into, for example, in the film, uh, for example, I went to Loliondo, and in the course, and I was actually going after we got the court order. I said we have a very, complex judicial system, but sometimes we get positive orders. So after a positive order that we got in September 2023, I had to go to Lolionto to verify whether there is compliance, whether the people are accessing what the court said they should access. And I met the old man. It was never planned. So maybe because the film, maybe someone can. I met the old man, and in the course of driving, I saw someone in the sort of a bomber that was left in Operation 22. And I decided to drop and meet him. So in the course of the greeting, I asked him why he's actually there. So he started narrating me the stories about 1950s. He was like my father, lived in Serengeti, and they were pushed out. And what happened in 2022, they come in one day and they told them, pack and go. Pack, we don't need you tomorrow. And he's very old man with the kids, he's like very shattered dreams. You are evicted as a child and you are evicted at your 80s. And then what else do you need in this world? In the course again of going, of course, into that film, there is a place I went with my father. And I went with my father for a purpose. He understands, maybe than me, the pain of eviction because he was evicted in Serengeti. And I wish actually to know whether what will be happening with my children if that is to happen in Ngorongoro. What will I be saying to them next 64 years? And what really happens in Ngorongoro after our eviction? Then we can reflect that through the life of my father in Serengeti. So when we are going to Serengeti, if actually we reached, my father told me he feared part of their bomber might be the hotel. And I asked him, but why do you think it is a hotel? He said, it was so beautiful, these people cannot be stupid to evict us for no reason. Every bomber, Maasai tend to move from one place to the other. And so we went to one, it is a campsite. Went to the other bomber, is the entrance gate to Serengeti. We went to the other, we found a 5-star hotel. The same place he told me it must be an hotel. And we found the hotel. And actually you can see that saying this was our bomber. It is a place they call it Ngorongoro Sober Lodge. So you evict people, build other people economy. So now it might be that evicting us. Maybe my child will come and say, this was our bomber, is now someone else. We'll never wish that to happen again. And so, of course, it also inspires people. I think that's the other part of the film, that in whatever struggle we can be in life, there might be a silver lining somewhere. So we should not be giving up. Whether the documentary, what will that means to me in the struggle? To me, I have made one decision a long time a bit, and that is I will not keep quiet. It's not an option. I can keep quiet, and they still can come for me. So they better come for me for being at least responsible. And this is what the message that I want to. You don't have to keep quiet, thinking you can be safe. And I say this because actually someone told me in May 2022, you have to shut up. And that's the language he used. And I told him, are you sure if I shut up, they will not come for me? He said, you don't know. 10 days later, he was himself arrested and was one of my clients. He was detained for 6 months, I can say, for doing nothing completely. He just happened to be a war counselor. And he was detained and accused of killing a person who the government says was killed a day after he was arrested. So how can you kill a person while you are under arrest? And so I think it's a good documentary. To me, it's very important because it gives lights and it actually make everyone understand what really happened to this monster known as Serengeti, because many people understand Serengeti as, a very good place. You can visit, you can do the leisure. But what happened in the shadow is the life of the people constantly being dream shattered. People who cannot access paracetamol. Very simple. Is so basic, right? A woman dying because cannot access the ambulance. to go to the hospital. A child who cannot go to school because the class is falling, because the government believe, and actually they said in public, this is the only way we can implement eviction. We cannot shoot in Ngorongoro because we can kill tourism. And so I think it's very important for that.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Joseph, for taking the time to speak with me today. Our team here at the Resistance Bureau truly appreciates all that you've been doing to shed light and advocate on behalf of your community, the Maasai community. Thank you for your continued courage and for letting us know here at the end how we can get involved in this campaign and collectively raise our voices. I wish you continued strength, and we certainly send you solidarity. And I look forward to future conversations with you. You've talked a lot about your father today, and I'm sure he's looking on very proud. So again, thank you so much for taking the time. Take good care in the meantime, and keep fighting the good fight. We appreciate you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.